This week in Linux, we've got some exciting updates to share with you, from the growth of Linux in the gaming world to many, many new distro releases. We'll take a look at how you can shape the future of KDE yourself, and there's a new virus removal tool for Linux from the folks at Kaspersky. All of this and more on this episode, so let's just dive right into your source for Linux good news. Linux gaming continues to grow, and this week we broke a major milestone with breaking the 2% threshold on the Steam hardware survey. Now, I actually forgot this happened before, but it happened in a brief period back in March of 2013. GamingOnLinux.com mentioned this when they covered it in the news this week, and that would happen because it came right out of beta due to some special items they were doing in Team Fortress 2, which got more people to use it on Linux, but then it slowly faded back down. And now we are gradually and organically moving to a higher standard on the survey. And we have the 2.32% status right now. And this is largely due to the popularity of the Steam Deck. That might not sound like much, the 2.32%, but it is a lot because if you compare it with macOS, which only has 1.47%, that's a significant difference, of course. But we also have improvement from the overall landscape of the Windows losing some, which is the most important piece here. Okay, maybe not the most important. Anyway, it's really cool. And most of this goes towards the usage of the Steam Deck because by a wide margin, the largest OS that's Linux-based that is on the Steam hardware survey is, of course, the SteamOS system that is on the Steam Deck by 45%, in fact. And there's also many other ones. There's a full breakdown that we'll show in a link in the show notes if you'd like to check out the full depth of it. But we have like Arch Linux and Linux Mint and Ubuntu and Manjaro and Pop! OS and all that. So if you'd like to learn more about this, you'll find links in the show notes. Would you like to help shape the future of KDE? Well, every 2 to 3 years, KDE sets new community-wide goals to focus on for the coming years. Now, these goals aim to improve various aspects of the KDE software and development process. Now, this is usually not open to everyone, but they're making a change for that, so I'm very excited. Now, previous goals included improvements toward accessibility in applications, works towards making the software more sustainable, automated, and refining many development processes, and many things else, depending on the different ranges and years. Now, it's time to determine the new set of goals that is coming up for the next couple of years. This year, there is the process change, as we talked about just a minute ago, that KDE community is now inviting everyone, including non-contributors and non-developers, to propose new goals. Now, here's how it works. First, you submit a proposal. You base it by creating a ticket on the Fabricator board using the provided template, and then you explain your idea inside that template. And it used to be where goals needed to be championed by someone that would commit to making sure it happens. And this time, there is a team approach. The team approach is good because it means that not all of the pressure is on that single individual goal champion, and they have different types of people. So there's technical leads who will steer like the technical aspects, and there's also like the person who drives the vision of the goal, as well as some people who promote the goal and that sort of thing. So that's pretty cool. And also champions are expected to rally people around their goal, not to do all of the work themselves, but they are expected to be the ones who are kind of pushing the initiative. Another cool thing is that the KDE team will be assisting gold champions with fundraising for specific projects that support their goal. So proposals are open right now, and that is open till July 5th. Then after that, there's going to be a period of time where they're going to be refining the proposals with community feedback and that sort of thing, which will end on August 15th. And then voting will begin by KDE contributors on which goals to use. KDE encourages everyone to participate in this goal-setting process. Whether you're a longtime contributor or new to the community, your input is just as valuable for shaping the future of KDE as anyone else's. So start thinking about the potential goals that you would be interested in, form your team, and submit some proposals to drive the KDE community forward. During the last goal process, there was one particular goal that I was hoping would get selected, and I hope it gets submitted again, because it was the Human-Centered KDE by Nico Love, who was also a YouTuber. If you'd be interested, you'll find links in the show notes. But his idea was basically create and design the system of KDE overall in terms of Plasma, plus also applications and that sort of stuff to make it kind of like what you would expect and just to optimize the usability and the user experience and that sort of stuff. So hopefully that gets submitted again. And I would like to go ahead and request, Nico, that if you were not considering to do that, that you would. So hopefully that sways you a bit. If you'd like to learn more about this or consider, submitting your own proposal, you'll find links in the show notes. Kaspersky has introduced a new virus removal tool, or the KVRT, the Kaspersky Virus Removal tool. Very creative name. Specifically for the Linux platform. This tool aims to help users scan and remove malware and other threats from their systems for free, which is good. Now, KVRT is not a real-time protection tool, but a standalone scanner that detects and removes malware, adware, and other known types of threats. Now, this is a topic that is very complicated because it's, what do you think that Linux needs this kind of tool? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Do you think Kaspersky is the tool that you'd want to get? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. All of those questions have been answered by me, Jill, and Ryan in Destination Linux episode 374. So if you'd like to learn more about what I think about this topic, you can find out by going to that episode, and I'll have that linked in the show notes. It may or may not be out at the time of you watching this, as if you watch it when I just released the show, but it will be linked in the show notes regardless, and I'll have a notification next to the link saying if it's released or not and that sort of thing. So check it out. Destination Linux 374. Very interesting conversation we had on Kaspersky Virus Removal tool, and I think you'll like it. So link in the show notes. blendOS is a unique entry into the Linux ecosystem. It was designed for users who need a highly flexible and customizable operating system, but also with the hope of being immutable and even having access to as many applications as possible. So what is blendOS? Well, blendOS is an Arch Linux-based distribution that supports application and binaries from multiple other Linux distros. So for example, if you would like to install packages from Arch, CentOS, Debian, Fedora, Ubuntu, and even Android, you can do this. And it does this by doing the application's installation through containers, allowing different systems to coexist without having lots of conflicts that would typically happen. Now, this OS is also immutable and uses atomic updates, so it's a very, very interesting distribution. blendOS 4 also introduces a lot of cool, interesting ideas. So blendOS 4 is now fully declarative, allowing users to install any packages or kernels or drivers or desktop environments from the Arch Linux repositories or the AUR, or the Arch User repository. And this means that users can easily customize their system with packages and that sort of stuff with just a simple configuration file. The new release also comes with pre-configured desktop environments, including GNOME, KDE Plasma, XFCE, Mate, and Budgies. Users can switch between these environments pretty easily using the track feature by modifying a simple YAML configuration file. It's very cool. You just go in, tweak the system, and you can swap out the DE without having to worry about all the leftover yuck that you might have in previous experience. So this is really, really interesting. And I think that blendOS is a super cool distribution, but it is not for everyone. It is not for everyone. It is not for beginners, and maybe not even like slightly experienced users. If you're an intermediate or enthusiast type of user, then blendOS is definitely worth checking out because there's a lot of cool stuff. But again, if you're a beginner, I would highly recommend trying something else. Now, they also have updated with the Linux kernel 6.9, nice, in this latest version of blendOS, and also the system GUI-based app and CLI utility for creating those containers, such as the ones for Ubuntu, Debian, Fedora, have been improved now because you can automatically create those containers by trying to install a package, whether it's a deb or RPM or that sort of thing. It's very cool because of the way that it does it. It used to require you to build the container yourself and then go into the container and then install the package. Now it does that automatically, which is just really cool. And blendOS is a very cool concept, like I said, and I have used it on and off for a while myself. But again, it's not for beginners. It's not for the highest variety of people. But if you are an enthusiast, a tinkerer, or somebody who is a big fan of Arch and want to play around and that sort of stuff, then blendOS would be a really good option for that. So Check it out and let me know what you think in the comments when you do, because I'm very curious of what your experience is. So let me know down there. Offensive Security have released Kali Linux 2024.2, a Debian-based distribution for ethical hacking and penetration testing. For those who are unfamiliar, Kali Linux is probably one of the most popular in this space, and it's got a lot of improvements for this particular release. So the key updates are the desktop environments have been upgraded. So GNOME 46 has been updated, and also there's some improvements to XFCE for high DPI modes. And they've also improved Kali Undercover, which is for those who would want to use Kali Linux, but also make people think that they're using Windows, because basically it goes undercover as Windows. So anyway, that's cool. But also what's cool is that this version has 18 new tools included. So we have Auto Recon, which is a multi-threaded network reconnaissance tool, Coercer, which automatically coerces a Windows server to authenticate on an arbitrary machine, Getsploit, which is a command line utility for searching and downloading exploits. There's also Sharpshooter, Sickle, and Snort, which is a payload generation framework, a payload development tool, and a network intrusion detection system, as well as many, many more that I did not have time to cover. And there's also been system enhancements for this release of Kali Linux, with Linux 6.6 LTS kernel has been patched to fix slowdowns and crashes with certain virtualization software, and also Nmap has been tweaked to allow privileged TCP/SYN or stealth scans without sudo or root. We also saw some updates to Kali NetHunter, and this supports Android 14, improved permissions and root validations for this release, as well as class selection for bad Bluetooth and support for Bluetooth Rubber Ducky, as well as support for some new devices with Kali NetHunter. If you'd like to learn more about Kali NetHunter or Kali Undercover or Kali Linux in general, you'll find links in the show notes. Parrot Security has announced the release of Parrot OS 6.1. This is the latest version of their Debian-based distribution focused on ethical hacking and penetration testing. This new version introduces updated tools and several enhancements, continuing to build on top of the foundation set by the Parrot OS 6.0 release. So there's kernel updates for the generic images as well as Raspberry Pi images. So for the 64-bit systems, that gets to Linux 6.5 kernel series, and for the Raspberry Pi images, now uses Linux 6.6 LTS kernel, offering better support for the latest Raspberry Pi 5 boards. Also, there's other Raspberry Pi enhancements, improved support for external devices, as well as proper Wi-Fi support on the Raspberry Pi 400. A non-serve has been updated to version 4.2, enhancing stability and fixing launcher scripts to ensure better anonymity and user experience. The Parrot Updater utility is reintroduced to prompt users with update reminders, ensuring the systems are always kept up to date. The Nmap network scanner utility is patched to fix errors in the MS SQL scanning Lua scripts, and also an important security update is applied to Bind 9. And of course, since this is a hacking distribution, there's a lot of updated hacking tools. So we have the notable updates, including Burp Suite, SSL Scan, Metasploit, Volatility 3, and many, many more. So if you're ready to get started, you can go check out the links in the show notes, and also check out their ready-to-use virtual machines that they provide so you can get started pretty quickly. So links in the show notes. The Linux Mint team have announced some really interesting changes coming up for the Linux Mint 22 release related to their software manager. So first of all, they have some cool enhancements like making the startup faster. They've improved load times overall, and they claim that the main window will appear instantly. They've also added some handling the ability for multiple formats. So there's a new setting for search results handling when an app has multiple formats, like having access to a deb or a Flatpak or both. That kind of thing. So that's really cool to see. But they've also done some things related to Flatpaks in regards to the verified versus unverified status in the FlatHub. So Linux Mint has decided to add some security safeguards for the unverified Flatpaks from the FlatHub. So by default, the verified Flatpaks are the only ones that are shown in the research results. And by changing it in the settings, you can enable the ability to see unverified Flatpaks, but it's not recommended. And in fact, they have a very strong warning about not doing that. So here's what it says. It says unverified Flatpaks represent a huge security risk. They are not officially approved by the developer of the application and could be maintained by anyone. to avoid potential malware, it is strongly recommended not to use unverified Flatpaks. And if you do decide to enable it, they actually have a notification, a status marker that says that it is an unverified status and has like a shield warning icon type of thing. So it's an interesting thing to do. I'm not surprised necessarily, but at the same time, it is the first to do this kind of thing related to unverified versus verified in the Flatpaks FlatHub store. And it's interesting because yes, that's true. Like, and what they're saying in terms of it means that it's not officially approved by the developer of the application. That's true. And that it could be maintained by anyone. That's also true. But that's kind of true with Debs. And that would make Debs that are not maintained by the official source also that kind of thing. Now, it's different in the sense that repositories made by Debian or Ubuntu or Linux Mint or Fedora or whatever maintained by people inside of those distros are third-party people that are not officially approved by the developer. So that's different because they're approved by the distro in a way. But at the same time, the argument here is that unverified Flatpaks are a risk because of that. And they say a huge security risk. Even though there is an element of permission structure inside of Flatpaks that eliminates a lot of access, so you can see what permissions are available. And if you want to lock permissions down, you can do that as well. So it's not exactly like a black or white type of situation. It's a little bit of a gray area here because yes, unverified Flatpaks could be problematic, but so could verified Flatpaks. We saw the thing with XZ backdoor. I mean, a backdoor could be added to another app or who knows. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's a guarantee. So it's interesting. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below your take on the verified Flatpaks versus unverified, the decision that Linux Mint has done. I'm very curious what your thoughts are on this. And also, curious what you think about the idea of unverified Debs being more potentially dangerous since they don't have any security mechanism and require sudo to install and that sort of thing. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. The NixOS team have announced a new release of their immutable distro with NixOS 24.05. For those unfamiliar, NixOS is a Linux distro based on the Nix package manager. NixOS uses an immutable design and also an atomic update model. It uses a declarative configuration system, which allows reproducibility and portability, meaning that you can essentially have your configurations on one system and move it over to another one fairly easily, as well as, Nix packages actually work in other distributions too. So there's that. Now let's talk about NixOS 24.05. There are a lot of release highlights. So first of all, there's a new LTS kernel with Linux 6.6 LTS being added for improved hardware support. They've also made updates to their desktop environments with GNOME 46 and KDE Plasma 6, as well as the Mate desktop environment has been updated and offers an opt-in Wayland session. They also introduced the Lomiri desktop to NixOS. It's developed by the UbiPorts team for Ubuntu Touch, and this uses Mir as a Wayland compositor. And Lomiri is a very interesting desktop because it is based on the old Unity 8 concept that was being developed by Canonical, and this is being picked up it was picked up a long time ago by UbiPorts, and they've made a lot of good improvements to it. So I'm very curious to see, how it works on NixOS and just in general, because it's been a while since I tried it out. And, it's one of those things where Unity was such a good desktop environment. I kind of miss it. So Lomiri, it's intriguing to me. So I'm looking forward to playing with that. Also, with this release of NixOS, they have added ZSTD or Z standard compression for firmware blobs for faster decompression. They've also added an option to install NixOS without Perl and installation of a stub ELF loader to handle binaries not made for NixOS. If you'd like to learn more about this particular distro, you'll find links in the show notes. Up next, we're going to talk about Purism. Now, we've talked about this company on this show before, and it usually goes on for a very long time because I have a lot to say because they've done some weird stuff in the past. And this is, another kind of weird thing. So instead of that, I'm going to do a reaction style. We're just going to read what is on the thing and talk about it. It says, welcome to Purism's investor report fiscal year end 2023. In this report, we're going to go through an executive summary, profit and loss statement, balance sheet, and then conclusion. So the first thing they talk about in their executive summary says all crowdfunded products delivered. They say that this is important because the Librem 5 phone was crowdfunded and we crossed shipping parity with where all the phones have been delivered to all customers. Now that is an interesting statement because on Reddit, when this post was made, there were people who said, no, I did not get my phone. And also, no, I did not get a refund when I requested it. I also know people who personally crowdfunded it back in the day in 2017, and they also have not received their phone or a refund. Because I asked them as soon as I saw this statement that they have delivered to everyone. Unfortunately, it seems like they have not. And benefit of the doubt, maybe they're not purposefully saying something that's not accurate. Maybe they just don't know and the logistics and their organization is not competent. It's possible. I don't know. I'll just give them the benefit of the doubt that they are bad at this. They say that their multi-million-dollar investment in R&D is paying off. Overall, more sales and gaining users. How? Why? Who knows? Says that we had over $9 million in revenue and turned profitable in 2023. We have more assets, about $5.5 million, than current liabilities, about $1.5 million. Assets to build liability ratio of positive 3.6 million. You might be wondering, how? Why? Who knows? Why? How are you profitable? How? You don't make I don't know of something you make that makes sense compared to any alternative option. Anyway, moving on. The Liberty phone, they say, which made in USA electronics, it's not made in USA. It's assembled in the USA, getting components from other places. So I'm not really sure what you mean by made in USA. They say it's quite lucrative with very high margin. Of course, it's a very high margin. It's the exact same phone that is already overpriced. So they announced a reduced price recently. So they knocked it down to $699, up from the $999. The hardware that is in this phone is from 2017. So it's already too high. And you're saying that there's a very high margin on the Liberty phone. Of course there is, because the only difference is that you assemble it in the US. It's the same phone. So if you're making a big margin on the phone that you previously talked about with Librem 5, and you now have another one that is effectively the same thing, of course the margin's higher when you charge $2,000 for it. Also, it says the Librem Awesome, what we call VPN for cellular, is growing monthly. It's a nice recurring monthly revenue model with high ARPU. Well, that's interesting. Also, it doesn't make sense. So it's basically a MVNO that is a cellular service on top of other cellular service that you do not own your phone number. They own the phone number. They register it for you, and then you use it. It's the idea is that it's private and you're anonymous on having that number, but it's weird because you're not technically anonymous. You're anonymous to the cellular company, but you're not anonymous to Purism. So I don't really get the point. If you had like a forwarding service, that would make more sense because I could still have my own number and then you have a forwarding thing. That would be kind of cool. This is a little weird. So with the profit and loss part of it, it says over $9 million in sales with 53% margin, much healthier gross profit. We lowered R&D and expense and focused on delivering the existing products that we had, therefore yielding a profitable year. But how? How did you... Who is buying your device? I'm very curious. Like, why? Why is someone buying these products? Because most of these products are rebranded, already available other products, and don't offer anything special or anything improved or any of that. So I'm not really sure why anyone would. I'm very curious. If you have purchased a Purism device and you like it, please let me know in the comments below why and for what reason would you recommend other people do it. It's very curious. I can't come up with one, but maybe I'm just too judgy on this particular thing because of their whole not giving refunds and not shipping devices and claiming that they had. And their conclusion is also kind of funny. It says, in a brief conclusion, Purism went from a high-risk, crowdfunded backed, therefore large liability to profitable, stable business. Well, most of that sentence is correct, up until you get to the profitable, stable business, because you're leaving out the fact that some people are not getting their stuff. So the high risk to them is that they lost their money and didn't get the product or their money back. So that's a pretty high risk to lose hundreds of dollars for nothing. So hopefully this gets them to actually contact people, figure out all the people who they have not shipped to and have not give refunds to. That would be great. Let's finish the show off on a positive note, because this week in Linux, we saw two awesome milestones be reached. The 25th anniversary of the Krita painting tool and the 20th anniversary of Phoronix.com. From humble beginnings, Krita and Phoronix have become pillars of the Linux community, with Krita revolutionizing digital art and Phoronix providing Linux news, hardware reviews, and much more. And for those who are not familiar, Krita started off as the K-Image Shop and Crayon in the KDE project. Then they tried to move on to their own sort of approach, and that's where Krita comes from. And Krita has become a prominent app in the digital painting space. And it's a really good application. I'm a big fan of it. And if you are interested in doing any kind of digital artwork through painting or whatever, definitely check out Krita, link in the show notes. Also, for those who are unfamiliar with Phoronix, this is a website that gives you news, hardware reviews, benchmarks, all sorts of stuff. And they are celebrating their 20th anniversary, which is very cool. And for those who are curious, yes, I do use Phoronix in making this show quite often, literally every week. So to Phoronix and Michael Larrable of Phoronix, thank you very much for making your website and allowing me to use you as a source and that sort of thing. Not 20 years. I've been making this show for 20 years. I've been making it for 7 years. So thanks for that. If you'd like to learn more about Phoronix, you can also check out the really cool posts they made of the most popular Linux news over the past 20 years, as well as the most popular Linux hardware reviews over the past 20 years. I'll have links to all of that in the show notes. Thanks for watching this episode of This Week in Linux. If you like what I do here on the show and want to be kept up to date with what's going on in the Linux and open source world, then be sure to subscribe. And of course, remember to like that smash button. If you'd like to support the show and the Tux Digital Network, then consider becoming a patron by going to tuxdigital.com/membership, where you can get a bunch of cool perks like access to our patron-only section of our Discord server and much, much more. You can also support the show by ordering the Linux Everywhere t-shirt or the This Week in Linux shirt at tuxdigital.com/store. Plus, while you're there, check out all the other cool stuff we have like hats, mugs, hoodies, and much more, tuxdigital.com/store. I'll see you next time for another episode of your source for Linux news. Thanks again for watching. I'm Michael Tennell. I hope you're doing swell. Be sure to ring that notification bell. And until next time, I bid you farewell.